Hello there, I'm Cass. Well, time to take a look at another Chibi Robo game that doesn't play anything like Chibi Robo. I miss Starfy.
For the sake of disclosure, I attended a media event this summer hosted by Nintendo where I played a bunch of Nintendo games, one of them being Chibi Robo Lash. Based on what I played at the time, it left a fairly good impression of a platformer that was brimming with potential. The potential successor to Super CastleVania 4 that we never got. Since then, the game has come out along with an interview with producer Kensuke Tanabe, who stated that if this entry isn't successful, Lash will be the final entry in the Chibi Robo series. Kind of reminds me when Awakening was supposed to be the last entry in the Fire Emblem series had it not sold 250,000 copies, though, unlike Awakening, this was said before the game went on sale, rather than after, and Awakening actually took ideas from previous entries of the series to satisfy both old fans and new, instead of just tossing Marth into a third-person shooter, but that's besides the point. So, if this game flops, did Lash at least leave the series on a high note? Let's find out. Chibi Robo Lash opens with news about aliens invading Earth to steal their resources, meaning our mechanical protagonist must jump, whip, and collect snacks? Through 6 worlds, because that will stop this crisis. Somehow. Yeah, the story doesn't make much sense, and it feels incredibly disconnected from the gameplay. There are coins to collect, trash to convert to energy, and chibi tots to rescue, but on the whole, the entire adventure doesn't reflect the resource crisis the story would have you believe is going on, and doesn't see any resolution come the ending. Heck, those alien invaders? You actually help some of them for goodies like costumes and coin when replaying the levels. It's nothing but a means to an end with no thought put into it. Also, glorifying snacks because apparently the plug the character was wielding wasn't a big enough one already. Anyway, aside from time in a level being based on battery life and the taking of trash, Lash is almost unrecognizable as a Chibi Robo title, bearing more than a passing resemblance to Pre-Symphony of the Night CastleVania. Specifically, the aforementioned Super CastleVania 4, with Chibi Robo whipping blocks and grabbing onto orange surfaces, all while nabbing blue or red orbs in his reach. Grabbing said orbs will extend his minuscule reach until the end of the level where the length returns to its minimum. Given how Konami has shown nothing but contempt for any new 2D entries in that series, well, technically every series that they do on, one would hope the tools granted by this paradigm shift would succeed in allowing the developers to craft some spectacular levels around the Lash's limit a la Trailblazer, but such is not the case here. The first few stages make some rather creative use out of the Lash, but Lash quickly runs out of steam and becomes repetitive equally as fast, with each level resetting the titular Robo's reach, making the experience nothing more than a padded exercise in patience, an exercise that is only made more difficult due to the awkward controls that resemble Castlevania in the worst way possible. X is used for a quick short crack of the Lash and hovering short distances in the air, while holding Y will cause a powerful attack that stretches Chibi Robo's cord as far as the current length will allow. The former is fairly picky about which direction it can be aimed, with only straightforward and diagonally upward serving as options. While the latter can be aimed at any angle, provided it's not blocked by a wall, this so-called Lash can be particularly sensitive and difficult to aim. When you complete a level, you'll be taken to the destination wheel, which is fun to determine where in the world you'll end up, with more options to spin it depending on what color spaceship you hit at the end of the stage. If you land on a number that will send you to a stage you've already beaten, you have no choice but to do it all over again. This destination wheel, this system of progression, is absolutely horrible. It needlessly pads out a game that already has a severe lack of substance while ignoring basic design for level progression. In most 2D platformers, each level is meant to be a test of skill, a challenge for the player to overcome. When a player has finished the level, they've proven their skill and understanding of a given platformer's mechanics. Thus, they can proceed to the next level and challenge that awaits them, or uncover a secret if they're especially skillful, like finding the warp whistles in Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, don't take this to mean that platformers should not experiment with different manners of level progression. For example, the Mega Man series broke new ground by allowing the player to choose which order they wanted to play through the stages, which made the difficulty much more flexible than other platformers at the time and many to this day. Even so, it still holds to this basic principle. Only after you beat a Robot Master and thus level, in Mega Man, may the player choose the next one. It's their choice to make, and not up to Lady Luck. Lash's destination wheel overcomplicates progression for this plotting platformer to the point of frustration, locking at the boss for a given world until you've beaten every stage. And you know what the worst part about this system is? After you beat the boss, you can choose what level to replay. So what's the point of this level progression system if it's immediately rendered irrelevant after trudging through its tedium? The answer? It is irrelevant. It was always irrelevant because you can just buy panels with the abundance of coins scattered throughout the levels to ensure you land wherever is necessary. The only possible justification for this inclusion is to earn a chance of making the boss easier via buying extra panels, but even then, A, that's done with a separate wheel, making the one for regular levels even more unnecessary than it already is. B, none of the bosses are particularly challenging.
Bottom line, defying conventions is not the same thing as quality design. The destination wheel in Ziplash exists for no other purpose than to pad out the playtime. Kind of like a lot of other ideas put into the game.
There are good ideas in Ziplash, no doubt, but they're all left to the wayside for frustrating gimmicks. The balloon and water skiing levels are the worst offenders by far, with terrible controls and a battery that drains faster than normal. The skiing sections in particular drain it so fast that collecting green orbs, the only way to recharge your battery in these sections, becomes a requirement. In contrast, the submarine sections are extremely sluggish, managing to top the banal nature of these portions with some of the worst controls for any water level. Much better than these vehicular piles of bile are the skateboard levels, which do a good job of blending the usual whipping with a great sense of speed, though it's not without its frustration, as a single slip-up will bring you to the game over screen. Another amusing moment is when Chibi Robo drains the life from one of his fallen foes, like Raiden in Metal Gear Rising Vengeance. That's a really stupid name. Though this commits the faux pas of bringing to mind a much better game that could be played instead of this. Really, the entirety of Ziplash is a best of compilation for much better games with a weak execution. The boss battles are uninspired at best, at worst utterly tedious, like this one which goes for a pseudo breakout showdown that slows things down to a crawl. Despite the shift from the last game's camera-focused gameplay to jumping and swinging, it still reeks of the tedious design present in Photo Fighter, mainly because of the mundane middle portion of the game and other methods and moments that exist solely for the purpose of padding out this platforming experience. For an example, before you can face the final boss, you have to pay for giant parts via the in-game currency. The final boss is behind a literal paywall. And that's in addition to the paywall that is the content locked out by the Amiibo. Even the timed challenges, the best portion of the game, particularly because of their brevity, are recycled multiple times for the sole purpose of extending the game's length through collecting candy. Not that the rest of the collectibles are especially hard to find, when almost every level hides some secret a few feet to the left of the starting point. Truly the height of ingenious level design, worthy of a place alongside Yoshi's No It Isn't. It's this lifeless level design that reveals how formulaic Ziplash truly is. Every world is made up of 5 typical platforming levels with a token vehicle section thrown in for the sake of variety, rather than crafting a quality deviation from the main experience. New characters are introduced in each world via secret portals, but they all request the same thing of you: food, causing you to gather up and get them the same glorified processed product that the last one requested. It's a bland, by-the-numbers, numbing-to-the-bone platformer that half-heartedly cobbles together ideas for much better games and throws them at a wall to see if any of it sticks, while the usual swinging from panel to panel has what little joy it brings slowly sucked away with every repetitive usage. What interesting ones it did have are left underdeveloped in favor of a handful of gimmicks that return in later levels, but remain what they were when they first appeared. Gimmicks, be it hovering over numbered blocks in the right order, or tossing explosives at brown blocks. Chibi Robo Ziplash could have been an exceptional platformer had it focused more on those brilliant ideas that it took, instead of glorifying gimmicks for full levels. Instead, it's a second-rate platformer that only succeeds in a scarce moment or so. Aesthetically, Ziplash is thoroughly confused, ranging from backgrounds that look like they belong in another game entirely, to throwing in ice blocks in a grassy level. Maybe it's some clever message about global warming and the effect it may have on the environment? Or, given the hypocrisy of flying around in a spaceship that no doubt consumes a good amount of energy, it's most likely just a bad visual presentation of various parts of the world. Oh, did I forget to mention that? Yeah, Ziplash's 6 worlds are based on the continents of our real world, but you wouldn't recognize them as a part of where they're supposed to be. For example, this is Antarctica. Yep, that looks right.
Suffice to say that if Ziplash is the game that will either make or break Chibi Robo, this series' future is bleak at best.
Putting aside the shift from cleaning to platforming, Chibi Robo Ziplash is a failed finale that neither plays to the strength of the Chibi Robo series or the genre which it chose to end on. For whatever can be said about its decent start, it's rendered null by its rapid devolution into a tiresome trial of levels whose monotony is only broken up by a few shining spots in the final quarter. It's a below average addition to the 3DS library that should only be considered at a discount price.
If this is the last Chibi Robo game ever made, well, it's better than Photo Finder. Not by much, but still. Chibi Robo Ziplash earns a 4.5 out of 10. That's all for now, folks. Until next time, game on, my friends.
This review is brought to you by the delicious taste of Nest Tea. Nest Tea. It's a drink!
Oh, and for people who don't actually know, no, this review is not actually brought to you by Nest Tea. I just thought it would be a funny little gag at the very end, considering how much product placement is in this game. It's ridiculous. Also, I couldn't actually find the regular Nest Tea. This was the only one I could find at the time. It's okay, I guess. It's not as good as regular Nest Tea. Yeah, it's just okay.